Most of the time, when someone doesn't like you, they'll never say it out loud. You just feel it. In the way they don't look at you, the way their tone changes when you walk in, the way conversations with them feel like walking through mud. And here's the hard part. You start wondering what you did wrong. You replay moments in your head, searching for that one thing you could have said or done differently. But the truth is, not everyone will see you for who you are, and that's not always your problem to solve. What matters is how you carry yourself in that space without letting their opinion become your reflection. There's a certain tension you can feel when you're around someone who doesn't like you. It's in the pauses, the short replies, the way their eyes slide past yours. And even if you tell yourself it doesn't matter, a part of you still feels it. It can make you second guess your words, shrink yourself a little, or overcompensate just to keep the peace. That weight adds up because it's not just about them. It's about what it does to you. Today isn't about fixing them or changing their mind. It's about how you can step into that kind of space with steadiness, with your dignity intact, and walk away without carrying what was never yours to hold. When respect feels one-sided, it's one of the quietest but heaviest weights you can carry in a relationship. You can be showing up fully, listening, speaking kindly, making room for their perspective, and yet every interaction feels tilted. Like you're giving something that's not coming back to you. Sometimes it's subtle. They might talk over you, dismiss your ideas, or roll their eyes in a way that tells you they've already decided your voice doesn't matter here. Other times it's more obvious, like they simply don't treat you with the same care you extend to them. And that imbalance wears on you because respect isn't just about manners, it's about value. It's how we silently communicate. I see you and you matter. When that's missing on one side, you start to feel smaller in the relationship without even realizing it. One of the hardest parts about this is how easy it is to slip into self-blame. You might start asking yourself, what did I do? Did I give them a reason not to respect me? And while it's healthy to reflect, it's dangerous to set up camp in the idea that every imbalance is your fault. Sometimes their lack of respect has nothing to do with you. It can come from their own unresolved issues, their own insecurities, or even the way they've been taught to treat people. But here's the thing, even if you didn't cause it, you still have to decide how you're going to respond to it, because letting it continue unchecked will start shaping how you see yourself. Respect at its core is a boundary. It says, this is how I will be treated, and this is how I will treat you. When you're in a space where that boundary is only being honored by one person, it's tempting to either push harder for their approval or to start matching their disrespect. Both of those roads lead to more damage. Pushing harder puts you in a place where you're performing for someone's basic decency. Matching their disrespect pulls you down to the same level and strips you of the self-control that makes you who you are. The better path, and it's not the easiest, is holding steady in your own standard while calmly addressing the imbalance. That can look like calling it out directly in a respectful but firm way. Not with sarcasm or anger, but with clarity. Saying something like, when you interrupt me like that, it makes me feel like my input isn't valued. I'd like to finish my thought. Or, I notice we're quick to dismiss my suggestions. Can we take a moment to consider them before moving on? The key is speaking from your experience, not from accusation, because the moment you shift into blame, they'll likely stop hearing you and start defending themselves. You're not asking for special treatment, you're asking for the basic respect every human being deserves. Now, I know there are situations where direct conversation isn't possible. Maybe the other person isn't safe to engage with like that, or they've already made it clear they won't change. In those cases, your power comes from limiting your exposure to the behavior and strengthening your own sense of worth outside of that relationship. That might mean creating more space, setting stricter boundaries on when and how you interact, or simply deciding not to invest emotionally in places that continually devalue you. It's not about punishing them, it's about protecting your peace. Here's the truth we don't like to admit: some people will never meet you in the middle, no matter how patient, kind, or fair you are. And when respect feels one-sided, the constant trying can be exhausting, not just physically, but emotionally. you can lose sight of what it feels like to be in a relationship where respect flows both ways. That's why it's so important to seek out and nurture the connections where it does. The more time you spend in mutual respect, the clearer you see the difference between what's healthy and what's not. And there's another layer here that's worth saying out loud. Sometimes the one-sidedness is not about them thinking less of you, but about them thinking only of themselves. They're operating in a self-centered way, so they don't even register that they're failing to give you the same respect you give them. It doesn't excuse the behavior, but understanding this can help you approach it with calm instead of pure frustration. When you realize their actions are a reflection of their own blind spots, not your value, it becomes easier to decide what's worth engaging in and what's worth letting go. The danger in a one-sided respect dynamic is that over time, it can slowly convince you to lower your own bar. You start telling yourself, well, that's just how they are, and you stop expecting more. That's when it's time to check in with yourself and ask, if I keep tolerating this, what does that teach them about me? And what does it teach me about myself? Because every time you allow disrespect without response, you're unintentionally agreeing to it. This isn't about becoming defensive or walking around ready to correct everyone who crosses a line. It's about living in a way that quietly but clearly communicates, I respect myself enough to expect respect from you. People feel that. They notice it in your posture, your tone, the way you carry yourself. And often, the more you embody that standard, the less you'll have to explain it. When respect feels one-sided, you have a choice. You can keep over-giving and hope they'll eventually mirror it back. You can give up and mirror their lack of care. Or you can stand firm in your standard, address what you can, and adjust your involvement where you can't. None of these are easy choices, but only one protects your dignity and your peace at the same time. And that's the one worth practicing over and over until it becomes second nature. If you're in that space right now, I want you to hear this clearly. The respect you give is not wasted just because it's not returned. It's a reflection of who you are, not who they are. And the moment you believe that, really believe it, you'll stop tying your worth to whether someone else chooses to honor it. You'll start seeing your respect as something you carry with you, no matter how anyone else responds. And that shift, that's when the weight begins to lift. When you're in the middle of tension, it's almost like the air changes. You can feel it in your chest, in the way your shoulders tighten, in the way your thoughts start speeding up. Your body is already preparing for a fight or an escape before a single word is spoken. And in that moment, everything in you wants to either shut down completely or push back hard. That's human. Our brains are wired to protect us when we sense conflict. The challenge is those natural reactions, snapping, raising your voice, cutting someone off, or going silent, rarely help the conversation move forward. They might give you temporary relief, but they almost always leave the relationship with more damage than before. Speaking calmly in the middle of tension isn't about pretending you're not frustrated or hurt. It's not about smiling through gritted teeth and acting like nothing's wrong. It's about choosing a response that protects both your point and your peace. It's deciding, I'm not going to let the intensity of this moment decide my tone. And that decision starts before you open your mouth. You have to give yourself a fraction of a second to breathe, to let the first wave of adrenaline pass, so you can think clearly enough to respond in a way you won't regret later. Sometimes that's as simple as pausing before you answer. People underestimate the power of a pause. That small gap between their words and your response can be the difference between escalation and resolution. It gives you time to hear the whole sentence, to process what's actually being said, instead of reacting to the sting of how it was said. And it gives them a moment to realize you're not matching their intensity, which can start to bring the heat down in the room. But calm doesn't mean quiet for the sake of keeping the peace. There's a difference between avoiding conflict and handling it with composure. Avoidance lets resentment build under the surface. Composure addresses the issue directly, but without adding fuel to the fire. That might mean saying, I hear you're upset, but I'm not going to raise my voice. Let's talk about this without yelling. Or, I want to understand what you mean, but I need you to slow down so I can follow you. These aren't magic lines. They're examples of holding your ground without making the situation worse. And let's be honest, sometimes the hardest part isn't calming yourself. It's not letting the other person's energy pull you in. Tension has a way of trying to recruit you. If they're angry, they want you to be angry too. If they're defensive, they want you on the attack. The moment you join them in that state, the focus shifts from the problem to the argument itself. The conversation becomes about winning instead of resolving. Speaking calmly disrupts that cycle. It keeps the focus on the actual issue instead of turning it into a battle of egos. Here's what calm really communicates: control. Not control over them, but control over yourself. And that's powerful. It says, I'm here to solve this, not to spin it into something bigger. People feel that. They might not like it in the moment, especially if they were hoping to provoke a reaction. But they'll respect it in the long run. Calm doesn't always change the other person in the moment, but it always changes the way you walk away from it. Of course, there's a fine line between calm and cold. Calm still has presence, warmth, and connection. Cold is detached, dismissive, and often makes the tension worse because it feels like you don't care. The goal isn't to emotionally check out, but to stay engaged in a steady way. That's where empathy comes in. You can acknowledge their frustration without agreeing with their behavior. Saying, I can see you're frustrated and I want to work through this, shows that you're invested in the relationship while still setting the tone for how you want the conversation to go. And we need to talk about what happens when you slip, because you will. There will be times when you lose your calm. You raise your voice, you interrupt, you say something sharper than you meant. When that happens, owning it quickly can actually strengthen trust. You can stop and say, I didn't like how I said that. Let me try again. That takes humility, and it signals to the other person that you value the conversation enough to self-correct. That kind of accountability is part of what makes calm so effective. It's not about perfection, it's about direction. Sometimes the middle of tension is not the best time to keep pushing the conversation forward. Speaking calmly also means recognizing when to hit pause on the discussion entirely. If emotions are too high on either side, it can be more productive to step away and revisit it later, saying, I don't think this is going to be productive right now. Let's take a break and come back to it, is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of wisdom. It keeps you from saying things that can't be unsaid and gives both people a chance to come back with a clearer head. It's also worth noticing how your body plays into this. In tense moments, your voice isn't the only thing people are reading. Your posture, your facial expressions, even how fast you're breathing, they all send signals. If you're trying to speak calmly, but your arms are crossed, your jaw is tight, and you're sighing every other sentence, your words won't land the way you want them to. Sometimes consciously softening your shoulders, slowing your breathing, or even sitting down can help your tone naturally follow. And here's the part most people don't realize. Speaking calmly isn't just for them. It's for you. Every time you handle tension without letting it control you, you build trust in yourself. You prove that you can stay steady in a storm, and that confidence carries into every other relationship and situation. It's not about avoiding hard conversations. It's about making sure those conversations don't cost you your peace. The reality is, tension in relationships is inevitable. We're human. We miscommunicate, we misunderstand, we hit moments where needs and expectations don't match. But how we navigate those moments decides whether they become turning points or breaking points. Speaking calmly in the middle of tension keeps the door open for resolution, for mutual understanding, for repair. And more than that, it lets you walk away knowing you didn't let the moment take the best of you. Because at the end of the day, calm is not the absence of emotion, it's the presence of control. And in relationships, control over yourself is the one thing you can always choose, no matter how the other person chooses to show up. Holding your ground without starting a fight is one of the hardest skills to master in any relationship. Most of us were taught in one way or another that if you speak up for yourself, it has to come with sharp edges. A raised voice, a hard stance, a sense of winning. Or, on the other side, we learned to keep the peace by staying quiet even when something was eating away at us inside. Both of those extremes come at a cost. One damages the connection with unnecessary conflict. The other damages your own self-respect. The real work is finding that middle ground where you can stand firm in what matters to you without turning the moment into a battle. It starts with knowing what you're actually standing for. If you don't have clarity about your boundary or your value in that moment, you're more likely to either overreact or back down entirely. For example, if someone speaks to you in a way that feels dismissive, holding your ground means naming that with calm certainty. I want to continue this conversation, but not in that tone. It's not a personal attack, it's a line, and lines are much easier to draw when you've already decided for yourself where they are. Without that clarity, you end up defending in the dark, reacting to emotion rather than responding to what's really happening. The other part of this is understanding that holding your ground doesn't have to look forceful to be strong. A lot of people think strength is about volume or force of words, but true strength is measured in control. It's being able to say what you need to say in a tone you can live with later. It's the ability to keep your voice steady and your words intentional, even if the other person is coming in hot. That's what keeps the conversation from sliding into a fight. You're not matching their heat, you're setting your own temperature. There's also a mindset shift that makes this easier. Your goal isn't to win the interaction. The moment you make it about winning, you've already invited a fight. Holding your ground is about respect. Respect for yourself and respect for the relationship. You can disagree without disrespect. You can be firm without being aggressive. And you can be clear without being cruel. That balance is what allows someone to actually hear you instead of just defending themselves against you. One of the biggest traps in moments like this is tone. You can say the exact same words in two different tones and get two entirely different results. If your tone drips with sarcasm or frustration, even if your words are reasonable, the other person will hear the challenge before they hear the content. So when you feel yourself getting heated, slow down, take a breath before you respond. Imagine you're talking to someone you genuinely want to understand you because you are, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment. Real life example, let's say your coworker consistently interrupts you in meetings. You could snap back with, "Would you let me finish for once?" and immediately put them on the defensive. Or you could say, "I'd like to finish my thought, then I'm happy to hear your perspective." Both hold the same ground. You're not allowing the interruption to stand, but one invites further conflict and the other invites resolution. Another key here is being okay with the fact that some people won't like your boundary, no matter how respectfully you communicate it. That's not a sign you've done something wrong. That's a sign they're not used to you showing up in this way, especially if you've been the one to keep the peace in the past. Your shift toward holding your ground might surprise them. They may test it, they may push back, and in those moments, your calm consistency will speak louder than any argument could. Holding your ground also doesn't mean you have to address every single offense in real time. Part of maturity is knowing when to address something and when to let it go. Not every slight deserves your energy, and not every moment is the right one to have the conversation. Sometimes waiting until both people are less charged makes it more likely your point will land. The important thing is that waiting doesn't turn into avoiding, because avoidance erodes your own trust in yourself to speak up when it matters. When you do decide to address something, focus on the specific behavior, not the person's entire character. Saying, "You always always start a fight." Saying, "When you spoke over me just now, I felt dismissed," gives them something concrete to work with. It also makes it more likely they'll respond to the actual issue instead of defending themselves against an attack on their identity. There's an emotional side to this that's worth naming. Sometimes we avoid holding our ground because we're afraid of losing the relationship. We think, if I say this, they'll pull away. But here's the truth. Any relationship that requires you to silence your own needs in order to keep it intact isn't actually intact. It's conditional on you staying small. The relationships that are worth keeping are the ones that can handle honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. It's also worth remembering that not starting a fight doesn't mean the other person won't get upset. You can control your delivery, your tone, your timing, but you can't control their reaction. They may still bristle, they may still raise their voice, they may still shut down. Your job is to decide how you'll show up regardless. That's the part you own. That's the part that keeps your dignity intact. And sometimes the most powerful way to hold your ground is to walk away, not in a storm of anger, but in a quiet choice to disengage from what's becoming unproductive. You can say, I want to continue this conversation when we're both in a better place to listen. That's not avoidance. That's setting the condition for a healthy conversation instead of letting it spiral into a fight neither of you wins. Over time, when you consistently hold your ground without aggression, you teach people how to treat you. They start to understand that you can be firm without being combative, and that your boundaries aren't up for negotiation just because someone reacts badly. And just as importantly, you teach yourself that your needs and values are worth protecting, not at the cost of connection, but as the foundation of it. Because the truth is, holding your ground and keeping the peace aren't opposites. The real peace comes when you know you can speak your truth without turning it into a war. It's the kind of peace you carry into every interaction, knowing you can be both steady and kind, both clear and respectful. And that kind of peace, it's not something someone else gives you. It's something you decide to keep. Sometimes in relationships, with family, friends, coworkers, or someone you love, you find yourself knocking on a door that never opens. You try starting conversations, you try showing understanding, you try giving them space, but no matter what you do, they stay closed off. It's one of the most frustrating and lonely places to be because you're not fighting, you're not even being rejected outright, you're just not being let in. And that silence, that distance, can make you feel invisible in a way words never could. When the door stays closed, the first instinct for most of us is to push harder. We think, if I just say it the right way, if I just give enough reassurance, if I just show them how much I care, then they'll finally open up. But here's the hard truth: some people are not ready, willing, or able to meet you in the place you're trying to go. Not because you didn't try hard enough, not because you're unworthy of connection, but because they've decided, consciously or unconsciously, to keep that barrier in place. And every time you push against it without acknowledgement, you risk exhausting yourself and, ironically, pushing them even further away. Part of the pain in these situations comes from the hope that things could be different. You've seen glimpses, maybe there were moments in the past when they did open up, when the connection felt real. That memory keeps you hanging on. You think, if it happened before, it can happen again. And sometimes, yes, it can, but not always on your timeline. And the waiting can slowly drain your emotional energy until you start questioning your own worth. The reality is, you can't make someone open a door they've chosen to keep shut. What you can do is decide how you're going to stand at that door, or if you're going to stand there at all. That's where your power lies. Because as much as this feels like it's about them, it's also about you. About your boundaries, your self-respect, and your emotional health. Holding space for someone is different from waiting endlessly for them to change. Holding space says, I'm here, I care, and I'm ready for a healthy connection if and when you are. Waiting endlessly says, I'll put my life, my joy, and my peace on hold until you give me what I need. One honors both people's agency, the other hands all the control to the one who's closed off. In practical terms, that might mean stepping back from constant attempts to engage. If every conversation you start gets shut down, give the relationship room to breathe, not as a punishment, but as a way of respecting their choice and protecting your own well-being. People sometimes mistake stepping back for giving up, but they're not the same. Stepping back says, I'm still here, but I'm not going to force my way into your space. I'm going to take care of myself while you figure out yours. And here's something to remember. Sometimes the door isn't closed because of you. They might be dealing with shame, fear, grief, or unresolved hurt that has nothing to do with your actions. It's human nature to make it about ourselves, to think if they're closed off, it must be because of me. But that's rarely the full picture. Often, the wall they built was there long before you came along. You just happen to be the person standing in front of it now. Still, knowing that doesn't always take away the sting. It's painful to offer openness and get silence in return. It can feel feel like rejection even if it's not meant to be. That's why it's important to keep perspective. Their choice to stay closed is not a reflection of your value, it's a reflection of where they are. If you measure your worth by their willingness to connect, you'll always be at the mercy of someone else's emotional capacity. That's where boundaries become essential. You get to decide how much access someone has to your time, energy, and emotional investment when they're unwilling to reciprocate. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors you control. They say, I'm here, but I'm not going to keep knocking so hard that I lose myself in the process. And when you keep those boundaries, you preserve the best parts of yourself for the relationships where the door swings both ways. Sometimes, in trying to get someone to open up, we unintentionally cross into trying to fix or rescue them. We take responsibility for their healing, their communication, their emotional growth. And while that comes from a place of care, it also puts you in a role you're not meant to fill. You can support someone, you can encourage them, you can model healthy openness, but you can't do their part for them. If they choose not to open up, that choice belongs to them, and so does the responsibility for what comes from it. The most freeing shift you can make is this: instead of focusing on how to get them to open their door, focus on keeping your own door open. Keep showing up as someone who communicates honestly, listens with empathy, and values connection, not for their sake alone, but for yours. That way, no matter how they respond, you know you're living in alignment with who you are. It's also worth acknowledging that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away from the closed door entirely. That doesn't have to mean ending the relationship, but it might mean no longer trying to reach them in the same way. You can still wish them well without standing outside and knocking endlessly. You can still care without sacrificing your peace. And walking away in this sense isn't about shutting them out. It's about stepping into spaces where your effort is met with openness. And yes, there will be grief in that, because letting go of the hope for immediate change means facing the fact that the relationship, at least for now, isn't what you wish it could be. That's a loss worth mourning, but grief can also clear space for acceptance. The kind of acceptance that allows you to stop trying to force a connection and start living fully where connection already exists. If the door does eventually open, you'll be in a healthier place to walk through it without resentment, because you didn't spend all your time banging on it. And if it never opens, you'll have built a life that isn't dependent on one person's ability to let you in. That's not indifference, that's wisdom. When the door stays closed, it's tempting to measure the relationship by that one fact. But it's more helpful to measure it by your own choices in response. Did you show respect for yourself and for them? Did you keep your dignity? Did you protect your energy while staying open to healthy connection? Those are the measures that matter, because at the end of the day, you can't control whether someone opens their door, but you can control whether you stand there endlessly, wearing yourself down, or whether you choose to walk in peace toward the doors that welcome you. And that choice, that's where your freedom lies. There are moments in life when you can walk into a room, join a conversation, or sit at a table, and something in you knows you're not entirely welcome here. It's rarely said outright, you just feel it. In the way conversations quiet when you arrive, in the lack of eye contact, in the subtle shift of body language. It might be in your workplace with extended family, a social circle, or even in your own home. And in those moments, your voice, the very thing that carries your perspective, your needs, your presence, starts to feel smaller. You catch yourself second-guessing your words, wondering if speaking up will just make it worse, if keeping quiet will be safer. The truth is, feeling unwelcome hits something deep in us. We're wired for connection, for belonging, and when those things feel threatened, our instinct is to protect ourselves. For some, that means withdrawing completely, blending into the background, speaking only when spoken to. For others, it means overcompensating, talking more, trying to prove your value, hoping that maybe if they see what you bring to the table, they'll change their mind about you. Both reactions come from the same place, a desire to earn a seat in a space that feels like it's not offering one. But here's the hard question. What's the cost of silencing yourself in those moments? Because the longer you go without speaking, the easier it becomes to believe that your silence is the right choice, that your presence doesn't add value. And the more you believe that, the more you start to disappear, even to yourself. Your voice isn't just about words. It's about showing up as you, in full, without shrinking to fit someone else's comfort level. Keeping your voice when you feel unwelcome doesn't mean you have to dominate the conversation or speak just to prove a point. It means allowing yourself to participate, to contribute, to share, even if you suspect not everyone wants to hear it. It's the quiet courage of not letting someone else's lack of warmth rewrite your worth. That's a choice you make moment by moment, sometimes sentence by sentence. One way to start is by grounding yourself in why you're speaking in the first place. If you make your goal to be liked, you'll bend your words to fit what you think others want to hear. But if your goal is to be clear or to contribute something meaningful, you stay anchored in purpose, not in approval. That shift makes it easier to hold onto your voice even when the room feels cold. It also helps to pay attention to your internal state before you speak. If you're already tense, defensive, or emotionally charged, your words may come out sharper than intended, and that can confirm for others and for you that you don't belong. Taking a breath, softening your tone, and speaking from a place of calm doesn't just help them hear you, it helps you hear yourself more clearly. Now, there's a difference between keeping your voice and forcing it into spaces that consistently reject it. Part of emotional maturity is recognizing when your presence is being met with genuine openness, even if it's subtle, and when it's being met with persistent dismissal. In the first case, your voice has a chance to build connection over time. In the second, you may need to decide whether it's worth staying in that space at all. Keeping your voice doesn't mean staying in harmful environments. It means not losing yourself, even if you choose to leave. Let's talk about those situations where leaving isn't an option, at least not right away. A job you need, a family event you can't avoid, a community you're tied to. In those moments, keeping your voice might mean contributing in smaller but steady ways. It could be as simple as making one clear point in a meeting, asking a thoughtful question in a group discussion, or offering your perspective when decisions are being made. The goal isn't to win everyone over. It's to keep your presence intact, to remind yourself that you're still here and still engaged. Another important piece is separating the reception of your voice from the truth of its value. If someone responds with dismissal, indifference, or even hostility, it can feel personal, and sometimes it is. But often, their reaction says more about their own limitations, biases, or insecurities than it does about your worth. If you tie your willingness to speak to how they respond, you'll always be at the mercy of someone else's emotional state. And here's the thing, your voice doesn't have to be loud to be strong. Some of the most impactful moments in a conversation come from steady, measured words spoken without apology. You don't have to match the volume of the loudest person in the room. You just have to match the weight of your own conviction. It's also worth saying that keeping your voice doesn't mean you're immune to the sting of feeling unwelcome. It will still hurt. There will still be moments where you walk away wondering if you should have stayed quiet. That's part of the process. What matters is that you don't let those moments decide your future silence. Every time you speak up, even in a small way, you're telling yourself, I still belong to me, no matter where I am. Over time, consistently keeping your voice shifts something inside you. You stop asking for permission to participate and start assuming your right to be there. And that confidence becomes noticeable, not just to others, but to yourself. The room may not change right away. The people in it may never offer you the welcome you deserve, but you'll stop waiting for that welcome to decide whether you'll show up fully. Because in the end, belonging starts with you. It's not something handed out by a group, it's something you carry. And the more you practice using your voice in unwelcome spaces, the more you realize that their acceptance is a bonus, not a requirement. You speak because you have something to say, because you matter, because silencing yourself has never brought you closer to the life you want. And maybe that's the quiet power in all of this, knowing that even if the room never warms, you didn't let it freeze you out. You kept your voice, you kept yourself, and that is something no one can take from you.